Silly butt, we back. Let's get it. Hey, CNG. They do not be playing.
Delta 1. Hey, ¿quién habla?
Yeah, they had to
Mira
pop
bien,
out at
hijo
the
de
end.
tu
Yeah.
Soy Mencho,
real.
güey. Relaja tu gente a la verga. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tus partidas, si no te voy a partir tu madre, tienes toda tu bola de perros. Te tengo identificado 30 güeyes. Hasta tus perros te voy a matar si no te relajas, güey.
This is how El Mencho talks to the police. This is the same man that has people tortured and killed on camera. Yet somehow the government remains unable to catch him or other monstrous cartel leaders like him. How do people like this stay in power?
He too
no matter
good.
the
He's been
horrors they
studying the
commit?
game.
And what makes them particularly brutal? Let's explore the most violent cartel leaders still active today. El Mencho. We can't talk about brutal cartel leaders without discussing Namasillo Asegura, El Mencho Carvantes.
The economical power behind Cartel Jalisco, they literally started with avocado, so they were farmers. They literally started moving from avocado to chemical precursors to make drugs like methamphetamine. It's like, okay, so what the U.S. market like? They like their avocados from Mexico and their from Mexico.
The Milenio kingpins were killed or arrested one by one, and the cartel was losing power. Eventually, it split into tinier factions, one of which was El Mencho's. Initially, it was called Los Torcidos, or the Twisted Ones. Then, it became the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
The Milenio Cartel splintered over, and one of those splinters was Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, the CJNG.
That was in 2009. Within a few years, it was deemed Mexico's bloodiest cartel. El Mencho was inspired by Los Zetas, a cartel with military beginnings that took brutality to a whole new level. They even rewarded their soldiers with honor medals for outstanding violence, and El Mencho
Like
copied
they really
this
got
culture.
time
So with the money
to
he made from
mint out their
trafficking, he
own
created a paramilitary
gold-plated
army
metal.
of manic psychopathic
And I'm not
soldiers.
talking about like
And in
metal.
July, footage
to do
emerged
some
of
work
that
on, like,
CGNG convoy.
metals.
These gunmen call themselves the Elite Group and pledge allegiance to El Mencho. They're armed with assault rifles with grenade launchers attached to the barrel, heavy machine guns, and also this gun. This is a 50 caliber
sniper rifle.
It's a powerful weapon that the
They
CGNG
basically
loves to show
telling you
off.
they hit
El
you
Mencho
like
recruited
Steph
the worst
Curry,
of the
bro.
worst, including a former clown who enjoys skinning people alive. And his philosophy is attack first. Unlike other cartels, like the Guadalajara or the Sinaloa, El Mencho doesn't use bribery as much as sheer intimidation.
They have a very intelligent strategy, which is basically branding themselves and looking like paramilitary power.
El Mencho attacks anyone who looks at him the wrong way or stands in the way of his rise to power. Police officers, judges, civilians, women, and
America, your
children.
neck.
He set fire to entire towns just to spread his message. He is now in charge. El Mencho is also destructive in a more persuasive way. He's almost solely responsible for the fentanyl crisis in the US. Initially, he produced and smuggled methamphetamine, but he adapted to the market, moving to heroin, then fentanyl, which has surpassed heroin as America's deadliest banned drug in recent years.
Just
we
know
have had, more overdose deaths in 1 year than we did of COVID deaths in our city.
Fentanyl had made thousands of people homeless, physically and emotionally destroyed.
It doesn't last long, so you're sick again. Like heroin you can do in the morning and you can be all good till tomorrow. Like fentanyl you can withdraw like 3 times a day.
And in the late 2010s, El Mencho infiltrated the avocado industry in Michoacan
I
too.
heard.
It's a consequence of the
man.
increase
Check
of
my other
price
videos out.
of avocado.
I'm gonna make them episode
Now,
1, 2,
all of this
3,
has
and
exploded.
so on and so
The
forth.
extortion,
All about the CJNG.
kidnappings. You have to pay for protection. I'm afraid of losing my family or having them lose me.
El Mencho had people tortured, killed, then hung from a bridge in Uruapan for everyone else to see. The message was to every farmer who refused to pay protection money or give their business to the CJNG. Also in the 2010s, this call between El Mencho
None
and
of this
a
stuff is
policeman was
funny.
leaked.
Mira bien, hijo de tu puta madre. Soy
It's a
Mencho,
shot.
güey. Relaja tu
I have a
puta
defense
gente a la
maybe
verga.
in
Soy
the
Mencho, güey.
Chuck it
Relaja
out,
tus
relax,
putas
a
partidas,
little
si
bit.
no te voy a partir tu madre, tienes toda
Or
tu
maybe a
bola
lot
de
of
perros.
it,
Te
my
tengo
bad.
identificado 30 güeyes. Hasta tus putos perros te voy a matar si no te relajas, güey.
He told the
Yeah,
cop
when
he
El
gonna
Mencho
kill
has you in
his
his
dog.
pocket, he expects you to do his darkest bidding without asking questions. The greater part of Mexico is terrorized by one man and his army of crazed torturers. The only hope of ending the violence lies in the recent rumor of El Mencho's death. In February 2022, it was reported that El Mencho died in a private hospital following a respiratory arrest. If this is true, the cartel will do its best to hide it. Rival cartels will swoop in for control the minute it's confirmed. But even if El Mencho is dead, a greater, more brutal cartel leader can emerge from the shadows inspired by him, just like El Mencho was once inspired by the Los Zetas leaders. El Mayo. Our list continues with the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. For many people, the Sinaloa cartel is equivalent to El Chapo, but the notorious cartel was founded by El Chapo and his partner, Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia. As of 2023, the Sinaloa cartel remains Mexico's largest and most powerful cartel, even 7 years after El Chapo's arrest and extradition to the US. This only goes to show how powerful El Mayo is. El Mayo met El Chapo in the 1980s while they were working for the now decommissioned Guadalajara cartel. After its kingpin's demise in 1989, the two pals seized control of the Sinaloa region and slowly expanded into most of Mexico. El Mayo and El Chapo were ruthless in two ways. On one hand, decades of unspeakable brutality, intimidation, and zero respect for life. On the other hand, they slowly infiltrated the Mexican government until they had people from all ranks in their pockets. So every time the Sinaloa cartel makes a dollar, a few pennies go into the officials' pockets. This way, instead of fighting the Sinaloa cartel, the government protects them.
Why do you think they let you do what you do?
Porque la mayoría de las ganancias van a dar a ellos. Para los altos del gobierno.
Here's an interesting twist. When El Chapo went on trial in the US, he claimed he was a mere victim of the more callous, more business savvy, and more brutal Sinaloa leader, El Mayo. According to El Chapo, El Mayo has been ruling the Sinaloa cartel from the shadows for a long time, as sort of a puppet master using El Chapo as a scapegoat. Of course, that could be completely untrue, as El Chapo would have said anything to get himself a lesser sentence.
He still ain't sentenced.
El Mayo does know how to rule the Sinaloa.
Been like this since like 2017.
Its profits are higher than ever before, including the time when El Chapo was in charge. The Sinaloa cartel is still in charge of a vast majority of drugs entering the states, owning trucks, submarines, aerial transportation systems, and incredibly complex tunnels. And of course, also owning the police, who protect these routes from getting blocked and their shipments seized. And as it turns out, El Mayo was largely responsible for Sinaloa's quick growth in the 1990s. According to El Mayo's wife herself, Rosario Niebla Cordoza, El Mayo was in charge of a brutal war meant to absorb every smaller cartel into Sinaloa, while El Chapo was in prison between 1993 and 2001. El Mayo is even more ruthless if you consider that, although he was indicted in 1998, he remains at large to this day. Today, there is a staggering $15 million reward for information leading to his arrest. There are also $5 million rewards for El Chapo's 3 most trusted sons. The fourth one, Ovidio, was arrested in January 2023. Today, it seems like there are two Sinaloa factions vying for power.
They were shooting out with the police for like a whole 24 hours.
But while El Chapo's sons expose their riches and act sloppy, El Mayo remains completely undetected and impossible to capture. According to the DEA, El Mayo is now suffering from diabetes in the Mexican mountains, but his
in the
health might
wind,
get him
and no one knows where
before
he at, so on and so forth. But this motherfucker suffering from diabetes.
Ivan
How the fuck y'all got all this
Guzman
information?
Salazar. Indeed, finishing our list is another Sinaloa cartel leader, but Ivan Guzman Salazar is not a friend of El Mayo. Ivan was born on August 15, 1983, making him one of El Chapo's oldest children. By the way, the children list is a bit murky, as it's estimated El Chapo has somewhere between a dozen and 24 children, but not all his kids got to be in charge of the Sinaloa cartel. It was his 4 eldest sons that were groomed from a young age for the job.
Judy, they are known as Los Chapitos, the foremost trusted sons of the world's most notorious drug kingpin. As the I-Team has reported for several years, federal drug investigators here in Chicago consider El Chapo's sons in charge of the Sinaloa cartel that remains this area's largest trafficker of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines.
Los Chapitos literally translates as the Little Chapos, so you can only imagine that these 4 men were raised to emulate their father in ruthlessness and brutality. And they really did. In October 2019, the DEA and the Mexican military led a big mission in an attempt to arrest Ivan and Ovidio Guzman. Ivan managed to escape, and by the time authorities got to Ovidio's house, Ivan's Sicario army rained hell upon the Mexican military. Dozens were killed, and the event is still remembered as Black Thursday. That's because so many people died for nothing.
Wow.
The Mexican president was intimidated into releasing Ovidio
That's
from
what I was just
custody.
talking
In
about.
January 2023, Ovidio was arrested for a second and final time. It's likely he will be extradited to the US to suffer the same punishment as his father. But as a result of Ovidio's arrest, horrific truths came to life regarding his older brothers. In April 2023, the FBI announced the 3 remaining Chapitos were indicted on a long list of charges centered around their fentanyl distribution. But the indictment stated something else. Los Chapitos took pleasure in personally torturing and killing their enemies. Reportedly, Ivan owns a ranch where he and his brothers repeatedly interrogate, torture, and kill rival cartel members.
Once information was obtained by these captives, typically through torture, these individuals were killed, either by or at the direction of the Chapitos themselves, and the bodies disposed of throughout the area. While many of these victims were shot, others were fed dead or alive to tigers.
In another horrible paragraph, the indictment described how Los Chapitos tortured 2 Mexican federal police officers.
For approximately 2 hours, members of the Ninis tortured victim 5 by inserting a corkscrew into victim 5's muscles, ripping it out of his muscles, and placing hot chilies in his open wounds and nose before being shot dead by Ivan Archibaldo Guzman Salazar.
There really is no limit to Ivan and his brother's brutality. Not only are they ruthless drug lords with no regard for human life, they are real-life monsters who get a kick out of inflicting unspeakable pain on other people. As of 2023, the Sinaloa cartel is split into 2 factions, led by El Mayo and Los Chapitos. But both factions are strong, violent, and determined to stay on top. That might mean that the Sinaloa cartel will remain Mexico's most powerful cartel for a long time. Or it might mean it will eventually crumble as the 2 factions start fighting each other more openly. Either way, cartels bring pain and destruction in a myriad of ways. Mexico and the United States share a giant border of almost 2,000 miles. Their cultures and businesses are closely intertwined. In 2018 alone, trade between Mexico and the US generated $671 billion. But because of cartels, the relationship between the 2 countries is suffering. Apparently, cartels make between $19 and $29 billion a year just from the US. Mexico is the world's 13th largest economy, and the US is only second to China. Today, Mexico is on the rise as one of the most cost-effective places to locate manufacturing operations. Lots of these operations are now leaving China and moving to Mexico for better skilled and lower paid labor. For geopolitical reasons, balancing economic power like that is good. But all this is in peril because the cartels seem to be in control of the government, and this is affecting the American government's outlook on Mexico as a whole.
If Americans start to think of Mexicans as drug runners again, regardless of why, that damages our most productive trading relationship and our most brilliant opportunity for our future right out of the gate.
But brutal cartel leaders like El Mencho, El Mayo, and Ivan don't care about things like this. They don't even care if someone lives or dies. They just care about their own power, and they're willing to do anything it takes to stay at the top of the game. If history is right, the only possible end for these men is prison or death. But history also shows that whenever a big fish dies, an even bigger, more brutal fish emerges from the shadows. So is there an end to cartel violence? Thanks for watching, guys. What do you think is the best way to stop cartel violence? Be sure to leave a comment, and before you leave, why not like and subscribe? See you next time.
Subscribe. Them boys is definitely tearing it down there, and I ain't gonna cap to you. Peace to the butt. We out.